All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today we are diving deep into a really bold argument, a case for Ethereum hitting $10,000. So what's actually behind a prediction like that? Well, let's get into it.
So, is a $10,000 Ether just a wild dream, or is it something that could actually be a reality and soon? The thesis we're breaking down today says, yeah, it's the real deal. And the argument hinges on some pretty specific and, frankly, fascinating factors.
And there it is, $10,000. I mean, that's a huge number, right? It's a massive psychological barrier, a massive financial milestone. But according to the source we're looking at, this isn't just a maybe. They're calling it an inevitable outcome. So let's unpack exactly how they get there.
Okay, so here's our game plan. We'll start with the bold prediction itself. Then, we'll look at who's been buying up all the ETH. After that, we'll get into what its true value might be, the big economic shift that needs to happen, and finally, how this all supposedly leads to that magic number.
All right, Section 1, the bold $10,000 prediction. Now, this isn't some guess about what might happen 10 years from now. No, the source puts a very specific and I gotta say surprisingly short timeline on this whole thing.
So, here's the timeline. The prediction is that ETH hits that 10 grand mark within just 12 months, starting from June 2025. I mean, wow, that is a really specific, really bold claim to make. So you have to ask, what's the evidence? What are they basing this on?
Okay, so Section 2. Who is actually buying Ethereum? The whole argument really starts with the data. It tries to answer this key question. Who is buying ETH right now? Especially when, the price has been kind of frustrating for a lot of people lately.
And this is where it gets really interesting. The on-chain data shows something pretty wild. Almost 2/3, 65% of all the Ethereum out there was bought in just the last 2 years. So think about that. While the price might have looked like it was going nowhere, a massive, quiet accumulation has been happening right under everyone's nose.
But okay, who is doing all this buying? Is it just, small retail investors hopping in? Well, the data says not at all. It's actually the opposite. An incredible 81% of the supply is sitting in wallets with more than 1,000 ETH. So this isn't a retail-driven thing. This is big money. These are the so-called whales making moves.
And this quote from the source really just sums it all up, doesn't it? Large players are accumulating while small investors, who have been in the market longer, are giving up. It paints this picture of a great wealth transfer, really, where this patient big money is soaking up all the supply from smaller holders who are just getting tired of waiting.
And look, it's not just some anonymous whale wallets either. The source points to actual named companies. You've got SharpLink Gaming, who reportedly scooped up over $400 million worth of Ether for their treasury. And then there's BitDigital, who announced they were planning to swap hundreds of their Bitcoin for ETH. I mean, that's a huge vote of confidence, right? Swapping the king for the prince?
So that's the who. But now for the why. Why are all these big players making these moves? Well, that brings us to our third section. What is Ethereum's true value? Because the core of this whole thesis is that the current price is just completely wrong. It's distorted and doesn't reflect what Ethereum actually is and what it does.
Okay, so to really get the value argument, you first have to understand this key difference the source points out between Bitcoin and Ethereum. Bitcoin is positioned as digital gold, right? It's a store of value. It sits there. But Ethereum, that's something else entirely. The argument is that it's a decentralized platform, a new kind of operating system for the entire internet. So it's not just digital gold, it's more like the digital ground on which you can build new cities.
And this chart, this right here, is the absolute heart of the price distortion argument. Just look at these numbers. At the time of the analysis, the entire Ethereum network had a market cap of around $290 billion. Okay, but stablecoins, just one single type of app that runs on Ethereum, had a combined value of nearly $250 billion. That is insane. It's like valuing all the highways in a country for less than the value of the trucks that drive on them. It just doesn't add up.
Okay, so keep that in your head. The platform being worth almost the same as just one of its apps, because that one application, stablecoins, well, the growth projected for it is, just look at this number, 28 times. And where does that number come from? It's not from some random crypto influencer. The source makes a point of highlighting that this projection, this 28x growth for stablecoins, came from the US Treasury Secretary. So if you believe that, and you believe Ethereum is the main platform where stablecoins live, then how can its current valuation possibly make any sense?
And all of this really feeds into this much bigger idea, right? The idea of Web 3.0. I mean, what is that? It's basically a new internet, one built not on servers owned by a few giant companies, but on decentralized networks like Ethereum. The whole point is to have an internet that's more open, more transparent, and one that can't just be shut down or censored by one single entity.
So what can you actually do with this new internet operating system? What gets built on it? Well, all sorts of things. You can tokenize real-world assets, like real estate. You can build a whole new financial system, that's DeFi. You can create exchanges that don't need a middleman, these DEXs. And really, it's a foundation for entirely new kinds of businesses, new social media platforms, things we probably can't even imagine yet.
Okay. So you're probably thinking what I'm thinking. If the whales are buying and the value is so out of whack, then why isn't the price already rocketing up? Why aren't we at $10,000 right now? Well, this brings us to section 4, and it's the final crucial piece of the puzzle according to this thesis, the macro shift. So let's talk about the big economic picture. For the past couple of years, money's been tight, right? Interest rates have been high, and that makes people less likely to invest in something they see as risky. The entire argument we're discussing today, it completely depends on that situation flipping. It needs a massive influx of new capital. It needs a favorable macro environment where money is cheap and looking for a home.
And this is what ties it all back to that 12-month timeline. The prediction is that this huge economic shift is going to happen within that window. Because, look, you can have the most amazing tech, the best fundamentals in the world, but if there's no new money coming in, the price can't go up. It needs fuel. And this macro shift, well, it's presented as the match that's going to light the whole bonfire.
All right, section 5. Let's pull all these threads together. Let's look at the full story, the complete narrative that this source presents for how Ethereum gets to $10,000. And remember, they don't frame this as a what if, they frame it as a when.
So here it is, the whole roadmap to 10 grand, laid out step by step. First, you have the whales quietly accumulating from retail investors. Step 2, the big institutions start to come in. Why? Because they both realize there's this huge gap between price and true value. Then, step 4, the big one. The macro environment shifts and a flood of new money comes into the system. And the result of all that, the predicted outcome, $10,000.
So there you have it. That is the case for $10,000 Ethereum piece by piece. You've got the accumulation, the valuation argument, and the necessary macro catalyst. But it really leaves us with a big question, doesn't it? Of all those moving parts, the whales, the tech, the global money flow, which one is the most important? Which factor, if it doesn't happen, means none of the rest matters? What do you think is the real key that unlocks Ethereum's future? Thanks for joining us for this explainer.